Right this very moment, Kyiv is dropping all restraints and may be ready to strip Putin off Transnistria. The world is holding its breath. Are the Ukrainian forces moving toward Moldova? Ukraine's foreign ministry has made statements that send chills down the spine. At the same time, an explosion rocks Belarus. Zelensky is ready to confront Lukashenko. Patience has run out. Covert operations and crippling sanctions will leave Batka with no room to maneuver. Russia is losing allies one by one, and Putin is losing his mind over it. Let's talk about it. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Farafonova here with the latest updates. Urgent. Transnistria is increasingly looking like Russia's final geopolitical relic in the region. Ukraine is setting in motion a process that may be impossible to reverse, and Kyiv openly signals its readiness to assist.
We are already helping through the development of joint border infrastructure, through Moldova's independence from Russian energy resources, and through coordinated cooperation on the path to EU membership. What is crucial is that this must be a joint movement.
As Ukraine's foreign minister explains, Kyiv's stance is not about military escalation, but about dismantling the remaining fragments of Russian leverage in the region. Still, if Moldova formally seeks support, Ukraine has made it clear it will stand by its neighbor.
We are ready to help our Moldovan friends, but we must stay focused on our own track. Still, I share the view that the security of Ukraine and Moldova is indivisible. I am glad to see that the Moldovan side clearly understands Ukraine's role and importance in regional security.
And now the shock factor. Are the armed forces of Ukraine prepared to enter Transnistria alongside Moldovan forces and dismantle Putin's foothold? The signals are clear, and this is not the first time such statements have surfaced. Earlier, Kirill Budanov emphasized that the region remains a long-standing enclave of Russian influence sustained by Moscow for over 30 years. Yet Ukraine has the capability to cut through those networks.
We can resolve this issue if we take it on, resolve it radically. But whether this should be done, that's where geopolitical questions begin.
Moldova itself has increasingly distanced itself from Moscow, but Chisinau does not intend to stop there. The next objective, reintegration of Transnistria. Russia is pushing the region toward an energy crisis, and Moldova does not want to waste time.
Our goal is the reintegration of the country, which must begin with Russia withdrawing its troops, allowing us to properly administer the region. We seek a peaceful resolution, and peace starts with troop withdrawal.
This is no longer just rhetoric. Reports indicate that the region is effectively being cut off from military supplies. According to media sources, occupying forces are facing increasing isolation.
Ukraine and Moldova have now jointly enacted a full blockade against Transnistria, marking a clear policy shift by closing all crossings and applying customs and security controls to everything moving in or out of the region.
Around 1,500 Russian troops remain without their usual supply routes, fuel, equipment and provisions. The gray schemes and customs loopholes long exploited by Moscow are closing. Pressure is mounting from all sides.
Transnistria is no longer a free passage zone, but a tightly controlled area where outside support is difficult and visible.
Moreover, Moldova and the European Union are reportedly preparing a reintegration roadmap designed to keep Moscow's leverage restrained for the long term. Details remain confidential for now.
We are actively working on a reintegration strategy, or roadmap. Sensitive issues require caution. We must think through steps that will yield results over time. We cannot disclose every detail in real time, as that could cause harm.
Belarus has not gone unnoticed as well. Zelensky hinted at operations there, specifically operations aimed at destroying towers used to guide Shahed drones. The president announced this on his Telegram channel.
Now the repeaters of modern Shahed drones are a new technique that has appeared on the territory of Belarus and helps to hit our people and energy sector. Because it is thanks to these repeaters that the adjustment is taking place. We did everything so that there were 3 or 4 less of them.
He also noted that this was done because Russia was using jet drones and not only through Belarus.
We had to do this because Russia used jet drones, but not only through Belarus. They went not only through their territory, they went with technological support, which is carried out from the territory of Belarus.
Zelensky also pointed to the importance of strengthening sanctions against Lukashenko, stating that he supports the war and helps to kill civilians.
We have evidence of this. Everything is on the maps, videos, everything is recorded. How Shaheeds entered from the territory of Belarus thanks to repeaters. And after that, strikes were carried out against us and there were civilian casualties. For us, this is a crime.
Lukashenko has pushed it too far. Ukraine imposed sanctions on the Belarusian dictator for his military support of Putin. Kyiv is also hitting pro-Kremlin Transnistria hard. What's happening there? Let's take a look.
It looks like Putin's closest friends are in for a rough time soon.
You know, when everything is calm, measured, and stable for us, we get bored. Stagnation. We want some action. And
The action is just picking up speed. Ukraine is becoming more and more active in going after those who help the Kremlin stay in power. And the first on this list, of course, the self-proclaimed president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. For his active assistance to Russia in the war against Ukraine, Kyiv has imposed a new package of sanctions against him. The decision was signed by President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Ukraine has applied a package of sanctions against Alexander Lukashenko, and we are significantly stepping up our efforts to counter all forms of his support for the killing of Ukrainians. We will work with our partners to ensure this has a global effect.
If we unite and come to an agreement, those who impose sanctions against us will be the ones who are afraid.
But for now, it's Batka you should be afraid of. The sanctions include asset freezes, a complete halt to trade operations, a ban on transit and transportation through Ukrainian territory, suspension of economic obligations and licenses, and a prohibition on participation in privatization and government procurement. Access to technologies, joint programs, and defense projects is being closed off. Restrictions are being imposed on entry and financial transactions.
Alexander Lukashenko has for quite some time been trading Belarus's sovereignty for the continuation of his personal power, helping Russians circumvent global sanctions for this aggression, actively justifying the Russian war, and now is further increasing his own involvement in escalating and prolonging the war. There will be special consequences for this.
In the second half of 2025, the Russians deployed a system of relay stations for controlling attack drones on the territory of Belarus. This intensified attacks in the north of Ukraine, from the Kyiv region to Volyn.
Some of the strikes, including those on energy facilities and railways in our regions, the Russians would not have been able to carry out without such assistance. Belarus.
In other words, it's no longer just about providing territory. As it was in 2022, Belarus has become a full-fledged element of Russia's military machine.
Someone is absorbing someone else. It raises the question, why?
Today, more than 3,000 Belarusian enterprises are working for the Russian war effort. They supply machinery, equipment, and critical components, including components for the production of missiles used to fire at Ukrainian cities. At the same time, infrastructure for the deployment of medium-range missiles on the territory of Belarus is being developed. Hazel? This is a threat not only to Ukraine, but also to European capitals. Lukashenko didn't just provide a platform. Belarusian factories supplied the mechanical base and key components for this weapon. And the supplies continue.
Belarus must not be separated from Russia.
But it's not just about Belarus. Ukraine continues to strike at another sore spot for the Kremlin, Transnistria, an area where Russian influence has been maintained for decades and where Moscow's garrison is concentrated. It is capable of threatening not only Ukraine but all of Eastern Europe.
We are already helping both by developing shared border infrastructure, by cutting Moldova off from Russian energy resources, and through joint cooperation on the path to EU membership. And it is very important that this should be a joint effort.
Moreover, Ukraine has sufficient resources to radically resolve the Transnistria issue.
Provided that there is sufficient political will in Chisinau, then we can effectively resolve this complex issue through the use of military force. I'm confident we can resolve it very quickly. In my opinion, this issue needs to be closed, and we must stop pretending that Russian occupiers have the right to be on Moldovan territory.
In this way, Ukraine strikes not only at the front lines, but at all of the Kremlin's centers of power, including the allies of the Russian dictator, turning them into vulnerable targets.
Russia is losing Iran. Putin's ally is overwhelmed with its own problems, and Tehran now has little capacity to assist Russia in the war against Ukraine. The United States is reportedly on the verge of action, preparing for possible strikes, while internal unrest is unfolding inside Iran. All the details in our report.
48 hours. That's exactly how much time Iran has left to prevent a major war. According to American sources, Washington is waiting for Tehran to present a detailed proposal for a new nuclear deal. If the document is submitted as early as Friday, another round of negotiations may take place in Geneva.
This is likely the last chance that US President Donald Trump will give Iran before launching a large-scale American-Israeli military operation, which could be directly targeted against the country's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. Axios, citing sources.
At the same time, Washington does not rule out an interim option. According to American officials, the parties may discuss a temporary agreement, a kind of pause that would allow restrictions to be fixed until a full-fledged nuclear deal is reached.
The past years have shown that reaching a meaningful agreement with Iran is not easy. It is not easy. We must reach a meaningful agreement, otherwise bad things will happen. Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. It's very simple.
But even within this formula, there is room for maneuver. Donald Trump's circle allows for so-called symbolic enrichment, a minimal level that would be completely transparent for international monitoring and would not involve a single technological step toward creating nuclear weapons.
The main strategy of the Iranians is to stall for time.
But there is one small problem here: the economy. And right now, it is in a very dire state.
At the present moment, Iranian banks, operating within the country, which are in various significant ways extremely important for providing essential financing for both the army and the military corps, are currently not just in a precarious state of pre-default, but are actually in a state of total default. And so, as a direct consequence of this, the deadlines and timelines set by Trump are encouraging and accelerating a significant outflow of capital.
But it seems the jokes are over. While the Iranians are trying to buy time across the ocean, the situation is gaining momentum. Since January, the United States has been deploying additional forces to the Middle East. At first, under the pretext of supporting protesters in Iran, and now as a lever of pressure in negotiations. Hundreds of planes, aircraft carriers, munitions and systems, air defense systems, but they have already been deployed at bases in Qatar and Bahrain. Moreover, along with the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Group, Trump has sent a strike group led by the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford.
The cost of starting a war for the Americans would be many times higher than the cost of maintaining the presence of the American fleet and American aircraft in the Middle East. And until the Americans are 100% sure that the outcome will be positive, they will not start a war. So right now, the key objective is to wear down the Iranians. And
it is not only the Americans who are wearing down the terrorist government of Iran, but also the ongoing protests. And no matter how hard Ali Khamenei tries to suppress the rebellious, the people of Iran are once again taking to the streets in protest. For the first time since the harsh crackdown on the mass demonstrations in January, students have come out onto the streets, showing that fear has not yet prevailed. Hundreds of protesters chanted, "Death to the dictator."
The sense of hopelessness in Iranian society today is something we haven't seen before. I mean, this feeling of anger has been deepening over many years. And now we are at a record new level of how dissatisfied Iranian society is with its situation, both in the context of foreign relations, prospects of new rounds of conflict with Israel and the US, as well as the impact of sanctions and so on. Another thing, previously Tehran was the heart of political protest in Iran. It still obviously remains the capital. What happens there matters. But now protesters are taking to the streets, even in small towns across the country. And
while tensions are rising in Iran, their enigmatic friend Great Russia prefers to stay on the sidelines. Instead of supporting its ally, Moscow holds exercises, buys weapons, and generally acts solely in its own interest, disregarding Iran's fate. As for what awaits the country next, peace or a major war, only time will tell.
China versus Russia. Now it's crystal clear. The Middle Kingdom is kicking Russia out of Central Asia, beginning a creeping reclamation of historically Chinese territories still under Russian control. And on top of that, Xi Jinping is planning a personal meeting with Trump. Here are the details.
The collapse of Putin's empire. Russia is ceasing to be a center of influence and power.
You must not be afraid. Anyone who starts to panic will lose everything right away. But it's absolutely necessary to understand what might happen.
But that alone won't really change the situation, because the invasion of Ukraine has become not just a military, but also a geopolitical suicide for the Kremlin, revealing the weakness of Putin's empire to the entire world. And while Putin is preoccupied with the war and saving his own power, China is taking over Russia's economic and political positions from the Caucasus to the Caspian Sea. Simply put, Moscow is losing influence in places where it had been considered a leading player for decades.
China is trying to absorb the Russian Federation as much as possible. Of course, it's not doing this through any kind of military escalation or aggression. This is a soft takeover, a cultural takeover, a resource takeover, a technological takeover, and a takeover in terms of formulating and integrating into a single financial system. Because the Russian Federation keeps its central bank reserves in yuan rather than, as before, in dollars and euros, freely convertible global reserve currencies.
Since the launch of the Belt and Road Initiative, China has been expanding its influence in Central Asia step by step. It is funding roads, railway hubs, pipelines, and more, turning the region into a new transit bridge between Asia and Europe, bypassing Russian territory.
When the ruble itself is worthless and the reserves of the national bank, which affect the Russian economy, are entirely dependent on Beijing, when machine building is completely dependent on Beijing, when high-tech industries are entirely dependent on Beijing, when all the chips, again, well, not only depend on Beijing, but probably primarily on it as well. What kind of sovereignty can we even talk about in such a situation?
Starting from September 15, 2025, Russians will be able to travel to the PRC without a visa. Meanwhile, in Siberia and the Russian Far East, Chinese enclaves are already forming, complete with their own schools, businesses, and culture. The Kremlin is not developing the region, but rather handing it over for settlement by foreigners.
The relationship between Russia and China has always been complicated, always ambiguous. And in the more recent chapters of their shared history, these complex relations resemble less those of close friends, reliable partners, or steadfast allies, and more those of merely situational partners, and at times, during certain periods of heightened tension, they even act as direct competitors, sometimes on a strictly regional level, and sometimes even partially on a much broader global scale.
Currently, China accounts for a third of Russia's foreign trade. As of September 2025, there are at least 13,000 legal entities with Chinese capital operating in Russia. The total revenue of these companies last year exceeded $41 billion. The
relationship between Russia and China cannot be positive, because this area, the South Caucasus region, Central Asia, has always been the zone of the CSTO and BRICS, essentially the sphere of influence of the Russian Federation, which absolutely does not suit China. And we can even see how the countries of Central Asia, Kazakhstan, for example, are now closer to China in terms of both the economy and security than, say, to the Russian Federation, which simply due to a lack of resources is no longer able to maintain the influence it once had in these regions.
And yet another blow to the Russian Federation from China. Chinese oil refiners have started refusing to purchase Russian oil after the US and other Western countries imposed sanctions on Russia's leading producers and some of their clients.
The relationship between the United States and China has become warmer, more constructive, although of course it remains tense, but they are finding common ground. Periods of mutual escalation, mostly economic of course, are replaced by periods of constructive dialogue. And the period of confrontation between the US and China is shifting into a kind of proxy.
Putin is slowly but surely losing power. Russia is losing its authority in the countries of the former USSR, which the Kremlin has always regarded as its satellites.
What do you think about the latest events? Share your opinion in the comments, like the video and subscribe to stay informed about the main headlines. See you soon!